keep this simple. I've kind of discovered just a very, very easy approach to supplementation, and again, kind of common sense. The number one question, this is the third and the final key to optimize bone health and overall wellness. The number one question is, do we need to supplement? And the short answer is yes. And I'll talk about three reasons why. But before we get into that, I just want to clarify that supplements are just that. They're meant to supplement a good diet, to bridge the gaps of what we're not getting or consuming on a regular basis. You cannot supplement your way to optimal health in any realm, whether it's bone health, heart health, brain health, digestive health. You cannot supplement your way to optimal health if you're eating food that's highly processed and inflammatory on a regular basis. So number one is those 4 building blocks. That's what your plate needs to look like the majority of the time through the day. And then we supplement to bridge that gap. So do we need to supplement? Yes, and here's why. Number one, everyone knows that eating a wide variety of health foods is crucial for good health. But in our busy lifestyles, it's very difficult to eat perfectly right all the time and get all of your nutrients, those 9 servings of veggies and those 3 to 5 servings of fruits, your micronutrients especially, every single day. It becomes very, very difficult to get everything you need. But avoiding or eliminating what's bad for you is just as important as consuming stuff that's good for you. So even though you might not be able to get your 9 veggies and 9 servings of veggies and 3 to 5 servings of fruit, that doesn't mean that McDonald's is okay. Does that make sense? So it's very difficult to get what we need in every day, but it's not because we're eating stuff we shouldn't be. Number 2, if you try to maintain a healthy diet, our modern food processing tends to rob our food of essential nutrients anymore. Our food is heavily processed by the time it actually hits our supermarkets. And just as an example, refined white flour contains less than 1/4 of vitamin E and B6, magnesium and manganese. And it's also devoid almost 100% of zinc by the time it actually is taken out of the field, our wheat, processed and put onto our grocery store shelves. And number 3, our modern lifestyle, stress, lack of sleep, exercise, and the environmental toxins that we're exposed to all deplete our micronutrients, especially the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that act as antioxidants or those anti-aging detoxification nutrients. So supplementation to optimize and restore those depleted micronutrients has become very important in this day and age in order for our bodies to function optimally, especially detoxification. So now that we know supplementation is important, what do we need to supplement? It's the next question. And this is where I take a very, very, very minimalist and common sense approach. I always like to say that we have to cover our bases, our basic building blocks, just like our diet, before we get fancy. So there is a million choices out there. Every grocery store, the big Walmarts, Targets, the health food stores have thousands of things to pick from, and it's just incredibly overwhelming. But we now know the 2 purposes of our food, the 4 building blocks to an optimal daily diet. We know that we need to supplement, so let's just take a step back and say, okay, what do I need to supplement? Supplementation is meant to bridge the gap in our diet. So we don't get fancy and say we're going to supplement with B12 because and B12 only because we need energy, or we're going to supplement and take a vitamin C all on its own because we want to have a healthy, strong immune system. Because that's not the way our food works, guys. So if we're going to supplement, let's supplement with as food-like as we possibly can. So food comes with many, many, many vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. So we can't just go and pick in our garden a vitamin, B12 vegetable and eat that, or just a steak full of antioxidants. So the number one thing that you need to be supplementing with before you start to look at anything else is a very good, very high quality, very well formulated multivitamin. that covers all the bases. It's just like swallowing food. It has all your, a full spectrum of vitamins and minerals in it, antioxidants, hopefully a few other things added to it to help assimilate and digest and be absorbed through the gut. But a multivitamin is absolutely essential. The number 2 essential is an omega-3 fatty acid, so fish oils, only because we live in such an inflammatory and highly stressed environment. So the 2 building blocks for supplementation, the 2 foundational supplements everybody needs to be taking, a very good multivitamin and a fish oil or an omega-3 fatty acid supplement. Beyond that, we do any kind of additional supplementing based on an individual's, basically assessment of an individual. We will, additionally supplement based on specific gaps in your diet. So you're just not a meat eater, you don't like protein. We might need to talk about getting you on a protein powder. Maybe you have celiac disease and you can't eat gluten and it's very restricted. You probably need to talk to you about supplementing in addition to a multivitamin and an omega-3. Specifically for bone health. If you have a diagnosis of osteopenia or osteoporosis, we need to talk to you about additional supplementation to support that bone health. Primarily calcium, D3, and K2 over and above a multivitamin and an omega-3 fatty acid. You can't just take a calcium because you have to bridge the gaps in your diet for that supplementation and for everything to build on its own. And then we also will talk about supplementation for specific health challenges. So possibly, we can talk about cinnamon and turmeric if you have type 2 diabetes, or CoQ10 if you have high cholesterol and you take a statin. So we do accessory or targeted fancy supplements after we've found a good quality, well-formulated multivitamin and omega-3 fatty acid. So let's talk about nutrients specifically for bone health. So we now know that we have to be on a multivitamin and an omega-3 fatty acid, foundational supplements. We're going to focus today, however, on for accessory supplementation for bone health to support bone building. So these are our building blocks after a multivitamin and an omega-3. The materials that must be present for your osteoblasts, your workers, the materials that must be present for your osteoblasts, those worker guys, to use to build that strong foundation. So calcium and vitamin D are what we call the dynamic duo for bone health. Calcium is the mineral that makes your bones strong, and vitamin D is the vitamin that we have to get that calcium out of the digestive tract and get it to absorb into the body. So the 2 go hand in hand. You can't efficiently break down and absorb calcium without vitamin D. The amounts that you're going to need vary with age, but calcium specifically needs to be every single day. You need 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per day between your diet, what you're getting through your food, and supplementation. One of the big caveats with calcium, though, and this is also usually a pretty big surprise to people, is that our body can only absorb about 500 to 600 milligrams at a time in any one sitting. So we talk with our members here quite a bit about calcium supplement, and they're taking it every morning with their breakfast, but their breakfast is yogurt. And so they're already getting about 700 to 900 milligrams of calcium in that yogurt, and then they're taking a 1,000 to 1,200 milligram calcium supplement and thinking that they're good, and they're not, because you're only going to absorb 500 to 600 milligrams, whether it's dietary or supplementation, at a time. So calcium supplements need to be taken away from all meals, all food, and your supplements. If you look at the store, you're going to see calcium supplements everywhere that are dosed at 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per tablet. And you're only going to absorb 50% of that at best. So your calcium supplement also only needs to be 500 to 600 milligrams in a single dose, and it needs to be taken away from food. You can also take too much or get too much. So you do need to kind of view your traditional diet, kind of keeping, a journal for a few days, seeing where you're at, because if you're consuming 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of calcium every day, chances are you probably don't need to be supplementing with it. You just need to get that calcium that you're consuming into your bone tissue. Vitamin D every day as well, guys. Current standards right now is anywhere from 800 to 2,000 IUs a day. However, there's research continuously coming out about vitamin D because this is so vital for every system in the body, quite honestly. But in the Northern Hemisphere, they're actually, possibly considering about 4,000 IUs a day as minimum dose. So right now, standard is 800 to 2,000 IUs a day. You can get your vitamin D levels checked at your medical doctor, and I encourage everybody to do that to know if you need to be supplementing for sure. But one thing about vitamin D, we all know that vitamin D is produced in response to sunlight. But one thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware of is if you wear sunscreen, you don't produce vitamin D in the sunlight. So it's become a huge issue, especially for our kids, because if they spend a day outside at the park or they're on the boat all day in the sunshine in the summertime, but they're covered in sunscreen, their body doesn't produce any vitamin D at all. That sunblock, that SPF blocks vitamin D production. And so the same thing with people my age and then people who are older, if your face cream or your moisturizer that you use every day has an SPF in it for skin protection, you aren't going to produce vitamin D on that, if your face is exposed to the sun as well. So just know. Protein, we already talked about protein. 50% protein by volume is our bone. So just kind of, again, keep a running tab or a journal for the next few days and see how much on average that you're consuming. Then vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is kind of like calcium's taxi. So if we visualize, we eat our calcium, vitamin D comes along. Vitamin D is kind of like our taxi or our railroad car that calcium gets put into. Vitamin D puts it into the bloodstream. Then K2 is our taxi driver. K2 takes that calcium out of our blood and deposits it into our bone tissue. So K2, our taxi driver, takes us from wandering the streets and delivers us to the address we need to go to. So that's one of the things I think a lot of people are scared to take calcium because they've heard that it's really bad for heart health and calcifies the arteries and that kind of stuff. And that is absolutely right. Vitamin K2 is vital if you're taking a calcium supplement because of bone health or diagnoses like osteoporosis. You need to be taking K2 so that calcium doesn't stay in the bloodstream and get deposited into your blood vessels and actually gets deposited into the bone tissue.